In the ancient world, before empires were forged by steel and fire, they were born from dreams. And no dream was ever as vast, as audacious, or as terrifyingly brilliant as the one that lived in the heart of a young Macedonian prince. This is the story of a man who didn't just inherit a kingdom, but who believed he could conquer the world itself. The story of Alexander the Great. Our tale begins not on a throne, but on a windswept hill. A young man, barely out of his teens, stands cloaked against the dawn. Behind him, the rising sun spills gold across the rugged Macedonian landscape. This is not just any sunrise. It is the dawn of a new era. His eyes, burning with an intensity that belies his age, are fixed on the horizon, on a world he has only read about in scrolls and heard about in whispers. A world he plans to make his own. Back in the hallowed halls of Pella, the weight of a crown settles upon his head. The nobles of the court watch in silence, their expressions a mixture of hope, fear, and skepticism. Could this boy, this student of Aristotle, truly hold together the kingdom his father, Philip II, had painstakingly built? They saw a prince. They could not yet see the living god he intended to become. The close-up of his eyes reveals everything they missed. A flicker of fire, a promise of conquest, a mind already calculating the fall of empires. And then, the machine of war begins to turn. The Macedonian phalanx, a terrifying porcupine of steel and flesh, marches in perfect unison. Ceresis, spears longer than any seen before, are raised to the sky, a forest of death moving across the plains, dust billows in their wake. A prelude to the storm they are about to unleash upon the known world. On the maps, in their command tents, the vast, sprawling Persian Empire seems an immovable giant, but for Alexander, it is merely the first and greatest prize. Animated lines of conquest snake across the parchment, a visualization of his ambition, from Macedon, across the Hellespont, and into the heart of Asia Minor. The names of battles that will echo through eternity are about to be written. Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela. At dawn, through the mist and smoke of the battlefield, we see the silhouettes of his companion cavalry, the elite of the elite, charging headlong into chaos. They are an extension of his will, a thunderbolt hurled at the heart of his enemies. At the Battle of Gaugamela, the fate of an empire is sealed. We see the great king, Darius III, the ruler of Persia, his face etched with disbelief and terror, turning his chariot and fleeing the field. His flight is the signal. The Persian lines, once thought unbreakable, crumble into panic and dust. The world's most powerful empire collapses not in a decade or a year, but in a single, decisive day. In the aftermath, the world bends a knee. The great gates of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, once symbols of Persian might, swing open not to a conqueror, but to a liberator, a successor. Crowds that once bowed to Darius now kneel before Alexander as he rides through their streets. He is no longer just a Macedonian king. He is the king of Asia, a title he accepts as his birthright. His ambition, however, knows no bounds. His gaze turns south, to the ancient and mysterious land of Egypt. We see his army, small specks of humanity, marching under a blazing sun across an endless desert. The horizon shimmers, a mirage of both water and glory. Here, in the land of pharaohs, he is not merely accepted, he is proclaimed a son of the god Amen. This divine confirmation only fuels the fire within him. He founds a city that will bear his name for millennia, Alexandria, a beacon of knowledge and culture in a world he is reshaping with brute force. Around crackling campfires, his soldiers celebrate. They are the most successful army the world has ever known. They raise their cups and their swords, their cheers echoing into the night. They have followed their king through deserts and mountains, against odds that would have broken any other force. They believe in him. They believe he is invincible, and standing on a high cliff, looking out over the lands he has won, stretching to a horizon he can barely see, so does he. But here, at the zenith of his power, a shadow begins to fall. A symbolic image shows his golden crown, the symbol of his unmatched success, slowly turning darker. The light that once illuminated it begins to fade, as shadows creep across its surface. The weight of the world is a heavy one, even for a god. We see him walking alone through the corridors of a captured palace at night. The flickering torchlight throws his shadow long and distorted against the stone walls, a solitary figure haunted by the scale of his own creation. The untouchable king is, for the first time, wrestling with the ghost of his own ambition. Inside the command tent, the mood has soured. His most trusted generals, men who have bled for him on a dozen battlefields, now argue with him. Their faces are grim, their voices tense. They point at maps that stretch ever eastward, into lands unknown and hostile. They speak of mutiny, of exhaustion, of an army that has marched too far for too long. His soldiers, once roaring with victory, now sit quietly, their eyes hollow. The dust of 1,000 miles is caked onto their armor, but a deeper weariness has settled in their souls. They have conquered the world. Now, they just want to go home. But Alexander will not listen. He turns his back on their warnings, his expression a mask of unyielding resolve. To stop now would be to admit a limit, and his entire life has been a war against limits. He rejects their counsel, a will go on. The army, loyal to the very end, picks up its spears and its shields and marches once more. They head deeper east, into the dense jungles and towering mountains of India. The sky itself seems to reflect the growing dread. Dark storm clouds gather over the landscape, a stark contrast to the brilliant sun that marked the beginning of his journey. A sense of looming danger, of a final, unwinnable battle, hangs heavy in the air. This time, the enemy isn't a king or an army. It's the world itself. It's the limits of human endurance. It's the poison of hubris that has been growing in his own heart. He believed he was unstoppable. And in the end, it was this belief, this magnificent, terrible conviction, that would prove to be his one fatal weakness. The year is 326 BC for 8 long years. Alexander the Great has carved a path of conquest across the known world, from the shores of Greece to the heart of Persia. Now, he stands at the edge of India, his eyes set on the world's end. But the world itself has other plans. The Indian monsoon unleashes its fury, turning the battlefield into a sea of mud. Rain falls in endless, gray sheets, soaking every man, every piece of armor, every hope. The legendary Macedonian army, once an unstoppable force, is breaking, not against swords or spears, but against the sheer will of nature. Soldiers, their bodies heavy with rain-soaked gear, collapse into the muck, too exhausted to rise. Their shields, once symbols of strength, now feel like anchors pulling them down. A strange sickness creeps through the camp, a fever that chills them to the bone despite the humid air. Faces turn pale, and breathing becomes a ragged, desperate struggle. These are not the proud warriors who conquered Tyre and Gaugamela. They are ghosts haunted by the relentless rain. Alexander stands amidst the downpour, the water tracing paths down his face like tears. He is the son of Zeus, the undefeated king, but even he cannot command the heavens. He sees the fear in his men's eyes, the mutiny brewing in their silence. For the first time, his ambition has met a wall. It cannot breach the limits of human endurance. The army, his army, refuses to march another step eastward. It's a silent, tense standoff. His generals plead with him, but the decision has already been made by the thousands of shivering soldiers who simply cannot go on. Standing alone under a sky the color of bruises, Alexander finally understands. He has conquered kings and empires, but he cannot conquer the human spirit when it has been pushed beyond its breaking point. His dream of a world united under his rule shatters against the simple, profound reality of his men's exhaustion. This is his first great defeat, not by an enemy army, but by his own humanity. The retreat is ordered. The army turns back, a long, silent procession marching west, away from the edge of the world, away from Alexander's ultimate ambition. Their journey back is a new kind of hell. The mud of India gives way to the searing sands of the Gedrosian desert. The sky, once a source of endless rain, now offers nothing but a merciless, blinding sun. The earth cracks beneath their feet, a mirror of the cracked lips and broken spirits of the men who walk it. Thousands who survived the battles in the monsoons now perish from thirst and heat. Alexander, refusing any special treatment, suffers alongside them, his own body pushed to the brink. This shared hardship forges a bond, but it also carves deep lines of weariness into a soul. Finally, they reach Babylon, the city of wonders, now the heart of his new empire. To wash away the memories of the desert and the bitterness of retreat, Alexander throws a celebration unlike any other. The palace halls overflow with music and laughter. Wine, dark and rich, flows from golden pitchers as if from a river. He wants to reignite the fire in his men, to remind them of the glory of their victories. But he is also trying to numb his own disappointment, to drown the voice in his head that whispers of his failure at the Hyphasis River. He drinks, and he keeps drinking. The music blurs. The faces of his companions swirl into a kaleidoscope of colors. He stands, but the ground seems to shift beneath him. He, the man who stood firm against charging elephants, now stumbles like a novice. The king who held the world in his grasp can barely hold his wine cup. That night, the celebration ends, but a new battle begins. In the quiet of his chamber, a fever takes hold. It is not the damp chill of the Indian jungles, but a searing, internal fire. Sweat pours from his body. He tries to rise, to call for his guards, but his legs buckle beneath him. He collapses, his body a dead weight he can no longer command. The great Alexander, who led cavalry charges at unthinkable speeds, can't even cross his own room. His hands, which once wielded the sarissa spear with deadly precision, now tremble uncontrollably. A cup of wine offered to soothe his thirst slips from his grasp and shatters on the marble floor. The sound echoes in the silent chamber. A final, fragile breaking. 4 days, he lies there, trapped within his own failing body. His most loyal generals and companions, men who had followed him to the ends of the earth, now stand helplessly by his bed. They see his eyes, open and aware, but his voice is gone. The man whose speeches could inspire thousands to charge into certain death can no longer utter a single word. They ask him, "To whom do you leave your empire?" And with his last breath, he is said to have whispered, "To the strongest." The king is dying, and the silence in the room is heavier than any mountain. A single candle flame flickers, casting long, dancing shadows on the wall. It struggles, wavers, and then, as if mirroring the life of the man in the bed, it is extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. Alexander the Great is dead at just 32 years old. His mistake, pushing himself and his men beyond mortal limits, believing, for a fleeting moment, that he was truly a god, only to be reminded in the most brutal way that he was a man, made of flesh and blood. But here's the paradox. In that failure, in that human end, his legend was truly born. Centuries roll by. Empires rise from the dust and crumble back into it. Rome, the Ottomans, the British all have their time and then fade. But the name of Alexander endures. His body died in that feverish bed in Babylon, but his story did not. His ambition, his audacity, his tragic human end, it all coalesced into a myth that would inspire Caesars, kings, and conquerors for millennia. The weathered statues of him may crack, but they still stand, gazing out over a world that has changed in 1,000 ways, yet still remembers his name. His mistake was not realizing his limits, and because of that, his legend became limitless.